You have come here to listen not only with your ears, but with the trembling strings of your inner being. What we are about to enter does not belong solely to the realm of concepts. It belongs to the corridor where light shakes and shadow walks, where suffering is not an obstacle but a gate. If you have carried another person's darkness and survived, you already know the taste of ashes, the fog of confusion, the slow erosion of self that comes when a mask devours your reflection. Many imagine that survival is the end of the story. It is not. Survival is the threshold. On the far side of that threshold is the question that begins the real journey. Who do you become now? In the language of depth psychology, an empath is not merely a person who feels very much. An empath is a psyche recruited early to carry what others could not or would not hold. In a house where storms had no names, the child learned the wind by listening to doors and footsteps. Sensitivity began as a survival strategy. To regulate chaos, the child became a mirror. The mirror calmed the room. The mirror paid the price. When the narcissist appears later, it is not an accident. Archetypes pull at one another with the gravity of old myths. The narcissist must feed on reflection to keep a brittle image intact. The empath offers reflection by habit, by hope, by love, by fear. So the dance begins. The first movement is subtle, a complement that feels like a claim, a need that feels like a command. You make yourself smaller to keep the peace, and the peace demands more. Guilt appears, but it does not feel like guilt. It wears the costume of responsibility. Shame appears, but it does not feel like shame. It poses as humility. Rage appears, but it does not feel like rage. It hides as concern for the other person. And, because you are trained to regulate the atmosphere, you regulate yourself instead. This is the crucible. To absorb what is not yours is to take in poison labeled as love. It is to wake in a hall of mirrors where your face changes each team you turn. It is to doubt your memory, then your judgment, then your worth. You try to love harder, to explain better, to prove more clearly that you mean no harm. The mirror fogs, the room spins. The person with the mask tells you that you are the problem, and because you have always tried to fix problems by fixing yourself, you believe it. Here is the secret the unconscious keeps for those who endure. The breaking is also the beginning. In alchemy there is a first stage, the blackening. The material rots, the light disappears, the vessel darkens. This is what your soul knows even when your mind is begging for escape. Something must die so that something true can be born. The naive belief that love means limitlessness must burn. The reflex that equates empathy with self-erasure must burn. The script that says, peace at any cost must burn. In the smoke of that fire, you begin to see shapes you missed before. You notice how flattery always precedes a demand. You notice how apologies appear without change. You notice the cycle by its rhythm, not by its words. Words can be beautiful. Rhythm does not lie. When you step out or are cast out and still you breathe, a silence follows. It is not numbness, though it can feel like that. It is the psyche resetting. Identity that once formed around rescuing has no job description. This is frightening. It is also freedom. In that quiet, you are tempted to become stone. You say to yourself, never again will I feel, never again will I open, never again will I love. This temptation is understandable. It is the nervous system protecting what remains. But if you harden permanently, the alchemy is incomplete. To heal is not to become stone. To heal is to become gold. Gold is soft, but it does not dissolve. Gold is bright, but it does not blind itself. Gold conducts, but it does not burn away. What begins now is the slow education of discernment. You keep empathy, but you add edges. You keep tenderness, but you add spine. You keep openness, but you add choice. Choice is the word that changes the story. You give not because you must, not because you fear abandonment, not because you hope to be chosen. You give because your soul says yes. And when your soul says no, you honor that no as a form of truth, not as a failure of love. There will be echoes from the old world. A voice in the mind will whisper that you are selfish for resting, cruel for refusing, ungrateful for leaving. Do not fight the echo with more noise. Answer it with authority. I survived, therefore I am more than your story about me. I choose, therefore I am no longer your reflection. You will mourn the self you once were. You will miss innocence. You will miss the ease of believing that love without limits could save everyone. Allow the grief. Innocence is not the highest good. Wholeness is. Wholeness is not pure light. Wholeness is the union of light and shadow. To become whole after surviving is to wear your scars as script, not as sentence. It is to say, my wound is a door through which meaning entered. It is to say, I will not trade my depth for the safety of forgetting. And now, standing at this threshold, the real work is named integration. You do not only face the outer narcissist, you face the inner one. You meet the part of you that needed to be indispensable, the part that bartered authenticity for adoration, the part that wanted to be above reproach so that love could never be withdrawn. You do not banish this part, you bring it home. Only then does the cycle end. Only then does your empathy stop volunteering for sacrifice. Only then does your mirror stop swallowing every face that needs it. This is the first gate. If you are ready, we will step through the second gate together and map the practices that turn survival into becoming. When an empath has walked through the labyrinth of a narcissist and still breathes, there comes a moment of disbelief. You stand at the edge of what you once called love, and the ruins look both familiar and foreign. You have survived, yes, but survival is not yet resurrection. The soul must learn how to live again. The Jungian psyche speaks through images, not logic. In one such image, imagine yourself as an alchemist before the blackened cauldron. Inside are the fragments of what was broken, trust burned to ash, identity melted, innocence dissolved. You stare at the vessel, waiting for it to cool, and ask, what now? The unconscious whispers, stir. For the transformation begins when you stop fearing the residue. The very poison you absorbed now becomes the raw material of wisdom. It is not discarded, it is refined. Jung called this process individuation, the birth of the true self, out of the ruins of the false. To individuate is to gather every disowned part of yourself and place it in the light without judgment. The anger you suppressed to stay lovable, the sadness you hid to stay useful, the intuition you silenced to stay safe, all of these return, knocking at your door. One by one, you must let them in. They arrive dirty, trembling, and confused, but they are yours. You welcome them, and in that welcoming, power returns. The empath who survives becomes the alchemist of their own suffering. They no longer worship purity, they worship truth. Purity hides pain, truth integrates it. Out of this alchemy, compassion changes shape. It is no longer soft and endless, it becomes luminous and precise. You can feel another person's sadness without taking it as your own. You can witness another's rage without becoming their target. You can stand in a room full of chaos and keep your inner stillness. This is not detachment, it is mastery. To reach this point, you must also understand the nature of projection. The narcissist's control relied on a spell, the belief that their voice inside your mind was your own. You must exorcise that voice, not with hatred, but with recognition. Each time you hear it whisper, "You are unworthy," you reply, "That voice is not mine." Each time it hisses, "You will be alone," you answer, "I was already alone, and yet I endured." In this dialogue, the false dissolves, and the authentic voice emerges, the voice that has been silent for years beneath layers of obedience and fear. It speaks softly at first, uncertain if it is allowed. You must protect it as you would protect a child. It will say strange things like, "I want peace," "I am tired," "I deserve gentleness." Do not dismiss it. These are sacred utterances of the self. You will feel loneliness in this stage, for awareness separates you from those still asleep. The world you return to seems the same, yet its colors have changed. You see behind smiles, sense motives in tones, notice the quiet despair behind constant noise. There is both sadness and clarity in this sight. You have lost the comfort of illusion but gained the dignity of truth. In the beginning, you may wish to close your eyes again. You may miss the simplicity of not knowing, but to see clearly, even when it hurts, is the price of freedom. You are no longer a mirror, you are a window. Through you, light and shadow can coexist without distortion. This is the sacred paradox of rebirth. You are both wounded and whole, fragile and indestructible. You have become the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who transforms private pain into universal wisdom. You do not need to save anyone now. You heal simply by being, by walking in truth. People will feel it without words. Some will be drawn to your calm, others will avoid it, for your presence exposes the masks they still wear. Accept both reactions. The point of awakening is not to be adored, but to be real. Jung once wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That is your new task. Acceptance is not indulgence. It is seeing yourself as the psyche sees you, a totality of light and darkness, sin and sanctity, grief and grace. When you can say, yes, this is me, and I am enough, you step out of the labyrinth not as a victim or a hero, but as a whole human being. The empath, who has endured this crucifixion of the soul, emerges with a new kind of light, one that no longer seeks permission to shine. You will notice this light in small, quiet ways, in the peace that stays even when others disapprove, in the laughter that rises without fear, in the ability to walk away without hatred. This is not the innocence you lost. It is wisdom reborn as gentleness, and it is the mark of transformation. The narcissist may have been your tormentor, but paradoxically, they also served as your initiation. Their darkness forced you to discover your strength. Their manipulation awakened your discernment. Their cruelty taught you the sacred necessity of boundaries. You no longer need to curse them, nor to forgive them prematurely. You simply outgrow them. They exist in a different frequency now, one that cannot reach the depth you inhabit. The dance has ended because you no longer provide the rhythm. The silence that follows is vast, but within it, something stirs, a faint melody that belongs only to you. It is the song of becoming. Having survived and transfigured, the empath now enters a stage where inner integration is no longer optional. It is the weaving of light and shadow into a tapestry that is entirely their own. The outer narcissist has gone, but their shadow remains in subtle forms, in patterns that once manipulated, in echoes of fear and longing that still linger. The task now is to recognize these shadows within oneself, to meet them without judgment, and to fold them into the self's embrace. You may notice impulses that feel familiar, the urge to rescue, to please, to erase discomfort in others at the cost of your own well-being. These are not sins, but signals, markers pointing to unresolved archetypes within. You approach them with curiosity rather than fear. You ask, why did this part of me allow the shadow in? And what wisdom does it carry now? Each acknowledgement transforms a ghost into a guide. Each recognition dissolves a pattern of unconscious repetition. At this stage, discernment becomes a compass. You can feel the difference between genuine connection and projection. You see how people wear masks not only in relationships but within social, professional, and familial spaces. The empath's senses are sharpened. Intuition now moves in harmony with conscious awareness. What once was overwhelming now becomes information, not a threat, but a map of dynamics, motives, and hidden currents. Dreams, symbols, and synchronicities guide the way. You might dream of bridges, or staircases, or forests, or oceans, all signaling thresholds between inner shadow and conscious presence. A mirror may appear, not to confuse, but to show your own reflection as it has matured, scarred yet luminous, tender yet strong. These visions reinforce a new archetype, the empath as a conscious participant in life, no longer a passive vessel, but a co-creator of psychic reality. Compassion changes form. It is no longer reactive or bound by guilt. It is steady, discriminating, and sovereign. You offer comfort where it is needed, but you do not give yourself away to empty vessels. You can love without dissolving, help without being consumed, witness without absorbing, and protect without retaliation. You hold a balance that feels impossible to articulate, but palpable in every interaction. Isolation may accompany this awakening, for few can understand a presence so finely attuned. Yet this solitude is not emptiness. It is the fertile soil in which authentic selfhood grows. You are free not from responsibility, but from compulsion. Freedom is measured not by lack of pain, but by mastery of your inner currents, by the ability to navigate relationships and the world without losing yourself to their chaos. In this balance, paradox becomes ordinary. You are tender and fierce, luminous and scarred, boundless yet rooted. You embody both the wounded healer and the shadow knower. You no longer act from obligation or fear, but from awareness and choice. Your life is a living meditation on what it means to carry darkness without being defined by it. The unconscious, having guided you through suffering, now entrusts you with a higher calling, to witness, to illuminate, to reflect possibility. You no longer need to explain, defend, or justify your path. Your presence itself is testimony. Others may be drawn to your calm, unsettled by your clarity, or inspired by your authenticity. All are valid reactions. Your role is not to save, but to exist fully, to serve as a living mirror, a beacon of what resilience, integration, and individuation can produce. At this stage, the empath is no longer simply a survivor, nor merely a vessel for projection. You are an oracle of lived truth, a guide through shadows without illusions. You are the one who has seen the abyss, carried another's shadow, endured the fire, and emerged capable of holding both darkness and light within yourself. You have become the embodiment of alchemy, turning poison into insight, ashes into gold, suffering into discernment, and darkness into illumination. After surviving, integrating, and becoming aware, the empath steps into a role that extends beyond personal transformation. You are no longer defined by what was done to you, nor by what you absorbed. You are defined by what you have become through the process of being capable of witnessing, guiding, and illuminating. The suffering endured was never wasted. It was the raw material of a higher calling. You now exist as a bridge between the depths and the surface, between shadow and light, between what others deny and what reality requires to be faced. Your presence communicates truths that words cannot fully capture. In interactions, others may feel exposed without knowing why. Your clarity and authenticity function as a mirror, revealing illusions they cannot see in themselves. This is not manipulation or judgment, but a natural consequence of your wholeness. Some will be comforted, others may resist. Both reactions are necessary. You are a catalyst, not a solver of every problem, and this distinction is vital. You no longer carry the burden of universal rescue. Compassion is steady, intentional, and discerning. You can give without dissolving, love without sacrificing your boundaries, and see deception without being deceived. The empath's insight is both gift and responsibility. You perceive patterns, archetypes, and hidden motives in others, sometimes before they are consciously aware of them. This sensitivity can feel isolating, but it is sacred. You are a guide in the subtle world, someone who teaches by presence, not coercion. You show, without words, that survival is possible and that the shadow can be endured and transformed. Your life itself becomes a living testament to resilience, discernment, and conscious embodiment. Yet, the journey does not end. The inner narcissist, the part of you that seeks validation, control, or avoidance, must continue to be recognized and integrated. True freedom emerges when the empath no longer unconsciously projects or suppresses, when all parts of the self coexist in balance. You are both the sensitive child and the wise adult, the wounded healer and the shadow knower, the tender and the fierce. This integrated being carries the gravitas of experience without being burdened by it. Your mission is paradoxical. You are called to both heal and illuminate, to comfort and challenge, to exist fully as a reminder that suffering, when faced consciously, becomes transformation. The empath becomes a model, not through preaching or instruction, but through being. You offer a silent map for those who are still trapped in illusions, showing that life can be lived with authenticity, awareness, and self-possession. The world may misunderstand you. The many will not see the depth of your inner journey. That is not a failure. Recognition is not your task. Embodiment is. You live as proof that the soul cannot be destroyed, that darkness can be endured, and that the light that emerges from the abyss is tempered, potent, and purposeful. The empath now operates on a plane where actions are measured not by obligation, but by conscious choice. Each interaction is an opportunity to express wholeness. Every boundary is a declaration of self-respect. Every act of love is intentional, not reactive. You are no longer merely an empath. You are a witness, an oracle, a teacher, a healer, but above all, a being who has walked through the fire, survived, and emerged capable of carrying both darkness and light without being consumed. You have become the living embodiment of what Jung described as individuation, a reconciled self, balanced, aware, and sovereign. Your life is now your message. Even after transformation, the empath's path is not free of peril. The world remains full of illusions, deceptions, and shadows that seek to draw the light back into darkness. You may encounter people who unconsciously test your boundaries, projecting their unresolved pain onto you, seeking the old dynamic of control and absorption. These encounters are reminders that the lesson of discernment is ongoing, that the process of individuation never truly ends. There is also the inner temptation, to harden your heart completely, to avoid vulnerability, to declare that you will never again allow yourself to feel deeply or love freely. This is understandable after enduring immense psychic assault. Yet if you yield permanently to this defense, the alchemy is incomplete. Avoiding all risk is not freedom. It is a subtle form of self-imposed imprisonment. True awakening requires that you remain tender, capable of intimacy, while refusing exploitation. It demands balance, a simultaneous presence of softness and strength, openness and discernment, empathy and self-preservation. Another challenge arises from social isolation. As your awareness deepens, you may notice the hypocrisy, vanity, and hidden motives in social circles, workplaces, or even family. This clarity can make ordinary life feel alien. You are no longer easily seduced by flattery, manipulation, or the need to please. While this protects you, it can also create a sense of loneliness. Yet solitude is fertile. It allows for reflection, integration, and conscious action. Your mission is not to conform to illusions, but to navigate the world authentically, guided by internal truth rather than external validation. The empath may also struggle with the residues of the narcissist's shadow, the echoes of guilt, self-doubt, or fear planted during past abuse. These echoes do not define you, but they must be acknowledged, confronted, and transformed. You answer the inner voice that says, "You are worthless," with clarity. "I have survived, therefore I am more than that." You answer, "You will never be loved," with awareness. "I have learned to love myself. My worth does not depend on another's approval." This inner dialogue is not an act of denial, but a conscious reclamation of sovereignty. Finally, the empath must guard against false martyrdom. Having endured, it is tempting to cast oneself as eternally victimized, building identity around survival alone. Survival is necessary but incomplete. Becoming is the goal. The empath must actively cultivate wisdom, boundaries, and intentional compassion. Each act of authentic engagement, each refusal to give away the soul, each decision to love or walk away with awareness, is a mark of mastery over what once threatened to overwhelm. In this stage, the empath becomes a living paradox, tender yet unshakable, compassionate yet discerning, luminous yet scarred. Every challenge encountered is an opportunity to reinforce the inner equilibrium, to practice sovereignty, and to refine the balance between light and shadow. Awareness becomes armor, wisdom becomes guide, and presence becomes influence. The empath's life itself is testimony that darkness can be survived, that suffering can be transformed, and that a fully integrated soul is possible even in a world where shadows persist. Having survived, integrated, and mastered discernment, the empath now steps into a role that transcends personal growth. Your life becomes a beacon not through words, persuasion, or teaching, but through authentic presence. The empath carries the paradox of shadow and light within, and this embodiment communicates truths that others cannot yet see. Those who are still entangled in illusions may unconsciously recognize your clarity. Some will be comforted, some unsettled, and some inspired. All responses serve a purpose. Your existence alone demonstrates that darkness can be endured, transformed, and integrated into wholeness. The empath becomes a guide without preaching. You illuminate the path through subtle example. Your boundaries teach without accusation. Your discernment inspires without judgment, and your steadfast compassion demonstrates that love need not dissolve the self. Others feel safe in your presence because you have learned to witness without absorbing, to love without sacrificing, and to stand firmly while remaining tender. This is the living instruction of the wounded healer archetype. Part of your mission is to testify, silently, that survival leads to growth, that suffering carries meaning, and that the psyche can be remade. You are the mirror in which others glimpse their own potential for integration. Yet your role is not to rescue or fix. It is to exist fully, to show through being that transformation is possible. By embodying this balance, you act as both balm and sword, comforting those ready to heal, challenging those who remain in denial. The empath's impact extends to the collective as well. By maintaining integrity, discerning illusion, and acting from conscious choice, you subtly shift the consciousness around you. You demonstrate that life can be navigated without sacrificing one's inner truth. You teach resilience without instruction, discernment without fear, and compassion without dissolution. The process is iterative. Each encounter with another human being becomes a rehearsal of awareness, each moment an opportunity to reinforce sovereignty and clarity. At this stage, the empath understands that their work is ongoing. Transformation is not a destination, but a continual practice. The inner narcissist, the residues of past projection, and the ever-present shadows in the external world remain challenges to navigate. Yet having integrated, the empath can approach these with wisdom rather than reaction. Awareness becomes a lens, compassion becomes intentional, strength becomes balanced. The empath's life becomes a living testament that wholeness is attainable, even amid darkness. This stage is also a call to authenticity. Every word, gesture, and decision is an act of embodiment. No longer compelled by obligation, fear, or desire for approval, the empath acts from the inner authority of the self. Each interaction demonstrates that survival has evolved into conscious becoming. The empath's light is no longer soft and vulnerable, but tempered, deliberate, and potent. It reveals truths without imposing, reflects integrity without coercion, and radiates authenticity without defensiveness. Ultimately, the empath's mission is sacred: to carry wisdom forged in suffering, to model the union of shadow and light, and to be a living proof that the human spirit can endure, integrate, and rise. You are no longer merely a survivor. You are a vessel of transformation, a guide of perception, and a symbol of what it means to carry darkness and still shine. At last, the empath reaches the culmination of this journey, the place where survival, integration, and conscious becoming converge into wholeness. You are no longer merely an empath. You are no longer only a survivor. You are not simply a wounded healer. You have become the living embodiment of the reconciliation of light and shadow, suffering and meaning, vulnerability and strength. Your soul carries both the fragrance of eternity and the weight of human fragility, fully awake to its own depth. This awakening is not a single moment, but a gradual realization that you are complete as you are, independent of external validation or approval. The inner narcissist no longer rules your choices. The echoes of past manipulation no longer dictate your worth. You have encountered every shadow within and without, and folded it into the fabric of your being. You carry knowledge of darkness without being consumed by it. You know suffering intimately, and in that knowledge, you hold power tempered with compassion. Your presence is now a living paradox, tender yet unshakable, luminous yet scarred, open yet discerning. You walk among others not to save, to rescue, or to please, but to embody authenticity. The unconscious has crafted within you a capacity for perception, empathy, and discernment that functions as guidance for yourself and as a beacon for others. Your life becomes a testament that enduring darkness can result not in bitterness, but in depth, not in retreat, but in authority over one's inner world. In this state, freedom is realized. Freedom is not the absence of challenges or manipulations, but the mastery over how they affect you. You can look upon another's shadow without internalizing it. You can observe deception without being deceived. You can love fully, give generously, and act with integrity, all while remaining sovereign. The light you now carry is refined. It is neither naive nor unguarded. It is intentional, potent, and unyielding. The empath's mission is sacred yet subtle. You influence not through instruction but through example, not through force but through being. Those ready to awaken will feel your presence as both comfort and challenge. They will glimpse possibility, learn from your resilience, and be inspired to navigate their own shadows. Your scars, once wounds of suffering, now serve as inscriptions of wisdom. Each mark tells a story of endurance, integration, and transformation. This is individuation completed, a reconciliation of opposites into a harmonious whole. You have transformed the poison into insight, ashes into gold, suffering into discernment, and darkness into illumination. The final truth is that you are not defined by what you endured, but by who you have become. You are awake, you are whole, you are sovereign. You are a soul that has carried darkness, faced it, integrated it, and returned to life with vision, power, and presence. And so, the empath who has absorbed the narcissist's darkness and survived does not merely exist. You become a living oracle, a witness to the human psyche, a bearer of light forged in shadow. You are a reminder that the soul cannot be destroyed, that suffering is a crucible, and that the ultimate transformation is the alchemy of consciousness itself. You have crossed the threshold into a new mode of being. You can now say, with full authority and authenticity, I am.